We're going to be talking soon to Mark Smith and Naveed Shah about the Veterans Affairs Department. They just canceled the union contracts with most unions, except the cops, obviously. We love the cops. But we're going to be talking to them. Mark Smith is president of NIFI Local 1 and steering committee member of the Federal Unionists Network. NIFI stands for the National Federation of Federal Employees. And Naveed Shah is political director of Common Defense, an organization of veterans fighting for veterans. Naveed, Mark, welcome to the Valley Labor Report.
Thanks for having us, Jacob.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
I really appreciate your time. Mark, was your local the first NIFI Local 1? Is that because y'all were the first NIFI local?
I believe so.
Wow. That's incredible. That's really cool. That's like super cool to be able to be part of an organization that historic. That's my union is 1858, so I don't think it was named. I don't think it was named chronologically, but very far from the first AFGE local. So that's really cool. I wanted to talk to y'all about what's been going on at the VA. The big news item is that the Trump administration tore up union contracts with most of its unions last week. Before we talk about that, Mark, can you give us sort of a summary of what's been going on at the VA from an employee's perspective over, since Trump has been in office? Like, give us the highlights of everything before this week.
Sure. A lot's been going on. It's been incredibly chaotic from the start with the Elon Musk and Doge assaults on federal workers, starting off with the 5 bullet points email where workers were asked to justify what they did last week under, threatened threat of firing. That wasn't directly stated by the VA, but Elon Musk had tweeted it out. So just sort of a lot of chaos right off the bat. And then almost immediately it was leaked that the Secretary of the VA, Doug Collins, and the Department of Veterans Affairs were considering a reduction in force or the mass termination of up to 83,000 workers across the Veterans Department of Veterans Affairs. So that includes the Veterans Health Administration, Veteran Benefits Administration, and the Veteran Cemetery Administration. So that's been ongoing. They also implemented a forced return to office for all VA healthcare workers and just all VA workers in general, which was extremely chaotic and on a short timeline. In many cases, therapists, mental health therapists, or physicians or other folks who had been doing telehealth or virtual care with their patients were forced into crowded cubicle farms without proper privacy and things that they might need for that. So that's sort of kind of some of the highlights, and all of that kind of leading up to the most recent cancellation of our collective bargaining agreement. So it's been quite a intense 6 months, Jacob.
Yeah, no doubt. Naveed, you're, like I said, you're the political director of Common Defense, an organization dedicated to veterans. How have veterans been receiving all of these changes with the VA? Like, what has that been like for recipients of care?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on, Jacob. I'm an Army veteran myself, and a lot of my friends who served that I served with in Iraq and elsewhere have been saying, and our members have been saying that they've been seeing cuts to their care, to their services that they receive at the VA. First, it was people who were in LGBTQ support groups due to interactions they had in the service. Those groups were cut because the therapists that were running them were fired and not replaced. We've been hearing from vets who are worried about what's going to happen to their care in the future. Is their cancer, treatment going to continue, or is it going to be delayed? A lot of vets are concerned right now because the amount of damage this administration has done to the VA already is terrible, and what we've seen coming down the pike, especially after this week, is really scary.
And it's worth pointing out, right, Mark, that over a third of VA employees are themselves veterans, right?
Yes, absolutely. Many veterans, after their service, feel a calling or a dedication to go back and serve their fellow veterans. Many of the nurses and physical therapists and psychologists and social workers and all kinds of other folks that work at the VA are veterans themselves. So not only is this attack on collective bargaining rights an attack on workers' protections more generally, but it's also really an attack on veterans who enjoy the rights and protections provided by a collective bargaining agreement that help them have the safe, healthy, fair working conditions that they need to give the best and take the best care of the veterans that they serve.
Right, right. Exactly. I mean, a phrase that the CTU kind of popularized when they went on their historic strike, I think in 2012, was "Our working conditions are our students' learning conditions," and there's a very similar dynamic, for nurses and VA employees. Your working conditions are the healing conditions of veterans, and so I want to jump into this. The ripping up of the union contracts. Can you tell me, how much of a change is that going to be from the previous Trump era status quo? Like last week, were your supervisors and was management actually continuing to take grievances from the unions and, continuing to bargain with the unions over changes in working conditions and things like that? Like had they actually been doing that, or is this basically a formalization of what had been a previous informal ignoring of the rules and contracts and unions at the VA?
It's a major change. So prior to this announcement, grievances, arbitration, bargaining or negotiation over changes in working conditions, all of that was still happening. It was basically the status quo, and that was in part because the lawsuit that our national unions have filed in response to the Trump administration's executive order stripping us of our collective bargaining rights. That lawsuit has not been settled on the merits yet, and so the Trump administration, in all of the cases and court hearings, has said, we're not going to implement this right away. We're going to wait until the litigation is finished before we implement. And so, they had locally and in our sort of workplace, like I said, grievances, negotiations, things like that have been proceeding mostly normally. And then this week, all of that stopped. Labor relations professionals and managers were told to stop processing any grievances, to ignore any need to notify workers or their representatives of changes in working conditions, and to stop any negotiations that were happening, and even going so far as to order union officers, elected union officers, to vacate any agency space that they might have. So in the VA, we often have, our union office. We might use an office in the VA. We're ordered to vacate those by August 12th, which is Tuesday.
Wow.
And yeah, so it's been a massive change.
That does sound like a big change. That's terrible. Can you explain for folks, legally speaking, they're relying on a national security exemption from the law that sets forth federal labor management standards. Congress back in the 70s gave federal employees the right to unionize and collectively bargain over their wages and working conditions, but Congress did include a national security exception. And the position of the unions is that the Trump administration is not using that exception correctly, and that it's wrong, basically. That saying that the majority of the federal government is national security exempt from collective bargaining rights is incorrect. Can you explain why? Not that the law matters anymore in the Trump administration, but can you, for people who are just out of curiosity interested in what the law actually says, can you explain why that is? Why it's not legal? It shouldn't be legal to do this.
Yeah, well, so I'm not a lawyer, so don't trust my legal advice. And without getting too much into the weeds, but from what I understand, the Trump administration, like you said, has invoked this national security clause of the 1978 Civil Service Reform Act to strip us of our collective bargaining rights. I'm not sure how a VA nurse being able to speak up about unsafe staffing and be protected by a union contract in their workplace for doing that, from any retaliation. I'm not quite sure how that's a threat to national security. And so I think that's part of the argument that union counsel is making, is that this move is really just a pretext to retaliate, to strip healthcare workers and others of their collective bargaining rights, so that the administration can proceed with its agenda, which they state in the executive order that that was the main reason, that unions were getting in the way of the agenda, which we know is to eventually outsource and privatize and send all of those taxpayer dollars that come from the VA to healthcare corporations controlled by billionaires. So we really think that, again, the national security argument is really just a pretext for the administration to proceed with its agenda. And some of the, I think, evidence for that is that the administration has exempted several groups from the executive order and from this stripping of the collective bargaining agreements, and that would be within the VA, police, firefighters, and security guards have been exempted, as well as several smaller unions, actually, that have collective bargaining agreements with the VA. And so it really doesn't seem like it'll pass the legal muster, but again, I'm not a lawyer, so I won't comment too much more on that.
Just to expand on that, I think that there are, my understanding is that there's like two arguments, basically. And the one is that, okay, yes, there is a national security exemption, but Congress did not mean for this national security exemption to apply to literally the majority of federal workers. If Congress had intended to exempt the majority of federal employees, then they would have written a much different law, right? And so you just have a factual dispute there about are VA nurses actually, is there a national security implication to them having collective bargaining rights? Factually, no, is the union's argument. And because that is the case, then Trump does not have the authority to invoke the national security exception. And then secondly, they're saying that this is a retaliation for First Amendment protected speech, which is what you talked about, right? That they are specifically targeting unions like AFGE, like NIFI, like IFPTE, who have done things to that the administration doesn't like, that have sued the administration over other things to try to protect veterans and VA employees and things like this. And so even if potentially maybe Trump might have the right to do that, he can't do it because of the way that he's done it, because like there are things, you can't target somebody for First Amendment protected speech. Like there are circumstances where, you could be arrested for something, but if you can prove that it is you are arrested for smoking pot, you are targeted specifically because of things that you said against the government or against the police or something, then you can get like a First Amendment, protection for that. And so those are kind of the two arguments as I understand it. I don't know, Naveed, if you're following kind of the legal stuff any closer than either of us are, but does that sound right to you?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jacob. It is, and let's just look at the bigger picture here. What we see right now, the attack on the VA is, to me, a test balloon. It's a canary in the coal mine because it's not going to stop with the VA. We already know that the first thing Trump did back in January was fire one of the board members of the NLRB. He fired their general counsel. Then now they're going after the VA's unions. I think this is a test balloon to expand further out. What they plan to do is dismantle worker protections. And everybody at home who's listening should be paying close attention, because if you enjoy a 40-hour work week, if you enjoy your weekends off, if you enjoy working in a safe environment, all of those things are possible because of the fight that unions fought, decades ago to earn those rights for all workers. And now those things are under attack. This is not just going to stop here with the VA. This is going to go far beyond what we're seeing right now. So while we want to fight hard to save the VA and make sure that the VA workers are protected and the veterans who receive their care there are able to receive the world-class care that they receive. We also want to look at the bigger picture and make sure that this type of retaliation against worker advocacy, this end of collecting bargaining rights, this weakening of worker protections does not expand. And if anything, we need members of Congress, we need our elected leaders across the country, whether at the state, federal, local level, to speak up, because this is not just happening in Washington. This is going to affect your local VA in your hometown, in your community. And if it affects them, it's going to trickle down. And for what this administration has done already in the 8 months that they've been in power, I think it's not just going to be a trickle down. It might be a tsunami. We should all be worried about it.
You're part of an organization that advocates for veterans, and the VA says that they are doing this for veterans. They point to official time that federal employees use, which, they try to make official time sound like you're just doing union business, like maybe you're campaigning for a union office or you're doing like union political work or whatever, but union official time is very strict, and it has to be related to a grievance or related to bargaining or something like that. A strictly representational functions are the only things that federal employees are able to use official time for, which is being able to get, being able to be paid by the agency that you work for to do union work. And people hear that and they say, oh, that's wild that you can do representational work on the clock. But that is a very common thing that most private sector unions also have, right? It is not that was actually something that public sector unions got from the private sector. It's a very common thing. Most union workplaces have the ability for a union steward to be able to do steward work on company time. That is not uncommon. But the VA is saying, well, look, you've got these VA employees that were doing grievances or whatever, or negotiating over workplace changes on the clock, and now, they're going to be free to serve veterans. And so that's their argument. Why do you think that is not going to actually benefit veterans and is in fact going to make things worse for veterans getting care from the VA?
Yeah, thanks, Jacob. A couple of things on that. So number one, on every survey that's ever been done of veterans who get their care at the VA, they rate their satisfaction levels of like 96, 95%, right? They love the care that they receive at the VA. They're not being affected by any VA worker taking some time to do some union work, because union work is work, and doing work should be done on the clock. That's just a really basic fact that I think makes sense to me and probably makes sense to everybody listening at home. And number two, we recently did a survey of veterans ourselves just a couple of months ago, and we found that 66% of veterans from all stripes, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, all said that they oppose the cuts that the Trump administration is doing at the VA because they love the care that they receive there. They want their VA workers to be, taken care of just like they are. And the fact that about a third or 25% of VA workers are veterans themselves certainly helps, and many of them are military family members as well. Again, this just goes back to my point earlier that they are going after the VA. They're using any means necessary. They're using very flimsy national security pretext to bypass laws. This administration is not above, bypassing laws and not in ignoring court orders. So we should be very cautious about giving them any leeway. And I think it's important that the VA workers and the veterans who receive their care speak up and say that, this is not right.
And I'll just add on to that, if the VA makes it more difficult to adjudicate grievances, to make sure that when workers are wronged by management, when workers are retaliated against for speaking out about lackluster care given to veterans, when workers speak out against short staffing that inhibits their ability to serve veterans, if the VA makes that more difficult to do, people will be less likely to do it. People will be less likely to speak out against unsafe working conditions. People will be less likely to speak out against short staffing and things like that. People will be less likely to speak out against discrimination from management, and that is going to make morale go lower than it already is, and it's going to make the care that people receive less good, ultimately. Having a good working environment is going to be good for the product that is created or the service that is delivered, and having a union there is going to make the workplace better. And so that's kind of, I don't know, Mark, if you have anything else that you wanted to say about that before we move to the next topic.
Yeah, I'll just say that official time, or lost time as it's called in the private sector, it really can only be used for representational actions. So what that means is I'm not spending my time when I'm acting as a union rep, like I said, recruiting people to the union or doing the union's books. It's all spent representing workers in fighting for safer, healthier, fairer working conditions so that they can better take care of veterans, right? I'm a healthcare provider myself. I'm an occupational therapist. What I need is a safe workplace to take care of the veterans. So a lot of the time that union reps are spending on the clock, it would be, going around the facility, making sure that the hospital environment is safe. There's not asbestos falling out of the walls. There's people have the proper PPE they need. Or, if there's a bad boss on a unit that is retaliating against nurses for speaking up or, picking favorites, all of that makes the environment less safe, and it impacts the care, right? Because like we talked about earlier, workers' protections are patient protections, right? If I'm feel safe in that workplace on the unit to be able to speak up without any fear of retaliation, that is just going to make sure that the care that's provided is super high quality and yeah.
Mark, what happens next? You are president of NIFI Local 1. What are the federal unions going to be doing in response to this? The American Federation of Government Employees, National Federation of Federal Employees, the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, National Nurses United. Those are, the four kind of biggest federal employee unions, I think. The National Treasury Employees Union, NTEU. What's the game plan here?
Well, I think the important thing to remember is unions have existed for many decades. My own union's been around since 1917, and we didn't get collective bargaining rights until 1962. So you don't need a contract to be a union. We're going to fight like hell to keep our contracts and make sure that workers are covered by those protections. So stay tuned for a National Day of Action. That's coming up. We need to get all of our unions together and fighting to protect our collective bargaining rights. And then we are also going to be doing, the Federal Unionist Network is going to be focusing on, how do you be a union in a potential situation where your boss or your management is not recognizing your union or is not honoring your contract. And there's something called no contract unionism or solidarity unionism or pre-majority unionism is what it's sometimes called. So we're going to be offering training to federal workers on how to fight back when the contract might not be honored or terminated like it is right now. In the meantime, while we're fighting to restore our collective bargaining rights.
How can people learn more about the Federal Unionist Network and get tuned into what they're doing and the trainings that they're offering?
For sure. If you're a federal worker or a union member, you can go to federalunionist.net and join us there. And if you're a member of the public, you can go to savepublicservices.com. That's savepublicservices.com and get involved in some of the campaigns that we are running to fight back and make sure that we retain worker protections and so we can continue to have quality public services for everyone.
Naveed Shah, what about common defense? If there are veterans listening that want to get involved, from outside of the VA, to protect the VA and to protect the workers that work there, how can folks learn more about your organization and get plugged in?
Yeah, absolutely. Veterans, military family members, all supporters, you can go to commondefense.us to get involved with us. We have a lot of trainings coming up to teach veterans how to use their voice, how to tell your story, how to talk about these issues in a way that makes an impact. So please join us at commondefense.us.
Naveed, is there anything else that you'd like to leave us with before we let you go?
I just want to say thank you so much for having us on, Jacob, and for highlighting this important issue. This is going to be a long fight, and we're gonna be in it, with our union brothers and sisters till the end.